All right, good morning, everyone. It is 9 a.m. We will begin our webinar on planning for disaster recovery, planning for disasters. So thanks for being here this morning. I'm sure we'll have a few more joining us as we go along. My name's Jeremy Cherney. I'm the president of Tobin Solutions, and we provide IT services and cybersecurity, and definitely part of security is planning for disaster recovery and making sure that your businesses can come back online in the event of a disaster. Today, we are going to be giving you a little education on some of the background information you need about, what do we think about when we think of disaster recovery? And we're going to go through some of the ideas and concepts that make up a disaster recovery plan, talk about what that looks like, give you guys some good tips and planning forward. And we'll also be able to open this up for questions along the way. So if you've got a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. If you've got a question you want to wait till the end, we'll be doing Q&A at the end. So we'll be able to do that. And we'll just jump in. So one of the things we want to talk about, like why is this even included in security? Why do we talk about disaster recovery? And really, from our perspective, security is any breach of the confidentiality of your systems, the integrity of your systems, or the availability of your systems. So confidentiality meaning that an unauthorized party got access to your data. Integrity is an unauthorized party or some other situation caused a corruption or change of your data. And the last piece is availability. Availability of your systems and data so they are working and ready for when you need them. So if you have an availability issue, that's a security event. That's why we're talking about it today. For all of you that are here, I'm assuming it's because you're interested in what a disaster recovery solution looks like, if you're interested in assessing your own disaster recovery solution, or you're just like, why is this even an issue? And why it's an issue is the threat landscape. It is getting very scary out there for a variety of reasons. And really, we're getting hit from all different directions in why this is a problem, right? We have the physical type of disasters. We've got the hackers out there. We've got internal threats. We have ransomware. There's just so many issues that are out there. Supply chain attacks. We'll get into that more. But the problem is getting worse. It's not getting better. And I don't know how long it's going to be while it's getting worse before it starts to get better. But just take the case that it is getting worse. And why do I say that? One is, from a ransomware perspective, hacking is a professional business. And ransomware is one of the biggest threats to your ability to recover from a disaster. People are making a lot of money in ransomware right now. It's not just the person with a grudge sitting in their basement. It's not the person who's, got it against the world and they want to take it out on you and your business. There are crime syndicates. There are people making big money in this, and they're doing a great job of it, by the way. From a business perspective, highly successful. They're making millions and millions of dollars. They have very low overhead. They have customer service centers, frequently asked questions. They'll support you in paying the extortion. And there's affiliate networks that are showing up where, one company becomes the main ransomware company, and then they sell their ransomware services to other companies that want to get into the business but don't quite know how to create their own ransomware. So, I mean, it's just the parallels to any business growing and expanding, and the cottage industries that show up is startling. So it's a professional business. So where there's money to be had, people are going to get into that game, even if it's an unethical criminal game. And you might be the victim of that. So that's one of the biggest threats you want to be wondering about and worrying about. And these people are patient. It used to be that, they would attack you, ransom your system, you'd have everything would be happening in the same day. Now, in some cases, we're finding out where people have been in systems for a couple hundred days. So it's not just happening in one day. They're spending time. Depending on what kind of target they think you are, they're actually getting into your systems, and they are looking at your systems, evaluating, understanding what you've got, trying to figure out how you do your backups. So maybe they can compromise your backups. And they're working together. So you got some people selling backdoors to your environment. They might have figured out a way to hack in, but they don't want to get in the ransomware game. So then they sell that backdoor to the ransomware gang and they can get in. So it's a crazy business that's happening out there. It's getting, like I said, worse, not better. That's why you definitely want to have this on your radar. There's other threats. We talk about the hacking. There are the physical threats. There are the threats to power. Just turn on the news anytime in the last few days or a few months, right? We have all the fires that are happening out west and other places. We have freezing. Look what happened with Texas a few months ago when their power grid and the issues they had, right? They had freezing issues, flooding issues, extended power outages. I'm sure some of you had power outages this last few weeks just in Wisconsin. And it wasn't just for a few hours. We had a client that was down for a few days. So, and then we have tornadoes and hurricanes and earthquakes. And again, we're seeing those on the news every day. These are not theoretical things. If you're in Haiti right now and you've had these earthquakes, it's tragic, but obviously any computer systems they had could easily be destroyed. So you want to be thinking about this is not just worrying about the ransomware. This is worrying about all threats. And there's really no shortage of threats out there. And it's your job really to make sure you understand the threats that are going to be impacting your business and addressing them as best you can. One of the ways people try and address things is they say, hey, I'm going to put all my stuff in a data center. I've got it all in the cloud, so I don't have to worry about it. Well, there's a company called OVH, which is the third largest data center in the world out of Europe. They had a fire in one of their data centers, and that caused outages with thousands of major sites and subsites. Now, when you think about some of these sites, I know that some of you out there are using different cloud services. Some are using very big, well-known cloud services, like Microsoft 365 or Google G Suite. Some of you might be using a line of business application. Where is that line of business application being hosted? How is that happening? If they have all of that stored in one of these data centers that had a fire and they weren't following best practices to have their own disaster recovery plan and have data outside of that data center if there was a problem like this, not only you might be down, you might be dead. There were companies that have gone out of business as a result of the OVH data center, or they've had to start from scratch, completely start over because they lost all of their data thinking it was safe in a data center. And then when this data center had a problem, it actually caused a cascade effect with a couple of other data centers that went down. So having things in the cloud is not necessarily all it's cracked up to be, nor is it going to guarantee that you're not going to suffer data loss. Supply chain attacks. That's becoming a bigger problem these days. A supply chain attack, you think about supply chain, about getting parts for like your products and things like that. The way software and computers are designed, it is part of a supply chain. On your computer, if you were going to look at all the different applications you have installed on your computer and all the different smaller applications you use, there's probably 50 to 100 companies represented. Then some of those services rely on other services. They bring things in. So these supply chain attacks are becoming a real problem. And there's a couple of big ones that have happened just in the last few months. One of them is by a company called SolarWinds. They make software that companies like my company use, like Tobin Solutions use to manage our clients' networks. Now, we don't use SolarWinds, thankfully, but I don't have any solace in thinking that ours that we use is going to not be hit. Look who got hit here. This is a small slide. This is just a small, small print slide here. But the Office of the President of the United States, the Secret Service, Department of Defense, NASA, Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security got hit. Microsoft got hit. So SolarWinds makes software to manage computer networks. You've all probably had us jump on your computer remotely and take a look. Well, that kind of software got hit. So they actually hacked into SolarWinds, and this is a real high-level example of how it happened. They hacked into SolarWinds, they updated the SolarWinds software, and when SolarWinds went to go out and update itself like it typically does and pushes those updates out to all of their customers, guess what? They all got the hacked version of the SolarWinds software. One of the companies that found it is FireEye. They're an IT security company. They're like one of the top security companies in the world. They actually got hit with it. They found it, but they actually got hit with it. It was in their network before they discovered it. So these are big companies, really smart people with big security teams that have gotten hit. Kaseya was one that happened just 6 weeks ago, over the July 4th weekend. Kaseya, again, they make this application that companies use to manage networks and do remote control and some other things. Again, just like what we use. In fact, we used to use Kaseya a number of years ago. They were hit around July 2nd. Their clients are mainly companies like mine. So what do we have? We've got 100 clients, right? So they hit 30 to 50 of their customers got hit, but that in turn, all of those customers got hit. Up to about 1,500 businesses got hit with ransomware was one of the last totals. Why I show you this one is to talk about the timeline for this. So Kaseya offers their solution as a service, a cloud service. They also offer it as a solution where you can install it, on your own computers on premise. Both had to be shut down. They recommended all the people shut down their on-premise servers. They also shut down their cloud services. The cloud services didn't come up for 10 days. And it was at least that long before they came up with the fixes that recommended for people to update their on-premise Kaseya servers to be able to get those back online. So 10 days, if that was a critical system. Now we're talking about technology that we use. It's kind of geeky technology, right? What if it's your line of business application that you have hosted in the cloud with somebody? What if they're down for 10 days or longer, or couldn't get back up and running in the case of the OVH data center fire? Now, all these companies got hit with ransomware in this case of Kaseya. Kaseya somehow got their key to decrypt the ransomware, and they started giving that out to people. But look at the timeline. 7/27 was by the time they got the keys. So over 3 weeks, these companies that had ransomware and did not have a good, effective disaster recovery solution were down for at least that long. And now you just start the recovery process after that. So guaranteed some of these companies have been down for a month or more. So you want to be looking at yourself. What if you guys were down for a month or more in total, or with certain key systems? You want to think like, what was that look like for you? How would you deal with that? So here's how you deal with it. We're going to be talking more about business continuity and disaster recovery. Business continuity is that plan to keep your business running while your systems are down and being recovered. And disaster recovery is that plan to actually get your systems up and running after the disaster. So it's really two plans. Most of you don't have either, or you've got bits and pieces of them. This is where if you are the person accountable for IT, if you're the person accountable for your business, if you're the person accountable for disaster recovery, there's an old business maxim: inspect what you expect. And we recommend this as your #1 priority. You want to see that plan, and you want to know that that plan has been tested, and you want to see the results of it. You want to know how these are going to work. You want to do those fire drills. You want to do that planning, and then actually see the results. It may not be you doing the planning. It might be your IT provider. It might be your IT department. However you do that. And a plan is not just restoring a file. Oh, I restored a file from our disaster recovery solution. That's good. That's helpful. That's not a full disaster recovery test. And we'll talk more about what that looks like. But bottom line, when you come out of this, you want to go talk to the people accountable for this and inspect what you expect. That is our recommendation. Why we say that is because it's security as a process. It is not a product. I'm sure you all have products you've bought around backup and disaster recovery, whatever that looks like, whether you bought them from us, whether you bought them from somewhere else. And you think, okay, I bought this product, therefore I'm protected. It's just like having a lock on the front door of your house. You bought a lock. Did you buy security? No, you bought a means to security, but the means to security is the process. And that process is, before you leave the house, you turn the lock and engage it, and then you jiggle the handle to make sure the door is securely closed and locked. So it's the process, not the product, that really saves the day. And that's a big idea. I want you to walk away here, because you're going to come out of here and someone's going to tell you, hey, you're going to say, hey, I came to this webinar and Jeremy said, inspect what I expect. And you're going to get all kinds of conversation about what products you have. But until it's been really tested and vetted and you know that it meets your need, it's not complete. Consider it's very, very incomplete. I'll bet within those 1,500 companies I was mentioning in the Kaseya attack, a lot of them did not have, or thought they had, a disaster recovery plan. They thought they had something that was tested, and they're finding out that the recovery looks way different, may not be able to happen at all, or is taking way longer than they thought. At a minimum, and I mean this is the bare minimum, and this has survived a long time. Even back when I was selling computers back in 1982, and we were talking about how to back up their WordStar files from floppy disk onto another floppy disk. 3-2-1 best practices. It's the minimum standard. 3 copies of your data. You want your primary copy of your data and at least 2 backups. And those 2 backups, one should be on a separate media. So a tape drive, a local drive somewhere else, a network share, something else. And then something that is off-site and air-gapped, meaning it can't easily be seen on your network or by hackers trying to discover where your backups are so they can delete them. You want it air-gapped. You want it off the network in some way. And this is the minimum, the bare minimum. If you haven't got this, this should be your first thing to do, is go make sure you've got this. But as we're going to talk, 3 copies of your data just may not be sufficient. It's not going to carry the day when it comes to some of the bigger disasters, especially as it results to how quickly you can get back up and running. You're going to get copies of these slides if you complete our survey, so you don't have to make all the notes on here. But a lot of what we're talking about here in business continuity planning, disaster recovery, is we're planning for those contingencies. The contingency, there is a fire. What do we do? There is a flood. What do we do? There's a power outage. What do we do? We got ransomware. What do we do? How do we get through all this? Not only how do we get the systems back and running, but how do you keep your business running in the meantime? Maybe you're going to print off copies, a report of your contacts, so you can at least call customers and let them know what's happening. Maybe you're going to have some other things in place here, but you have to go through this process, and it is a process. And this is what's going to have you succeed and win this game. You have to develop your planning policy. You have to look at your business analysis, and you got to really see, like, what's the impact of different systems being down? What can you do to put some preventative things in place? Create those strategies of how you keep things running, get that plan in place, test it, and then maintain that plan. It's only 7 steps, but it takes something. But we recommend you start to go through this and start to think about this, because this is what you're going to be asked about when the disaster hits. When there's the fire, the flood, the ransomware, they say, okay, you've been in charge of this. Give me my accounting data. Get me my accounts receivable. Get me my customer relationship management system. Get me my ticketing system. Give me my project system. All of those things you're going to want to have up and running as quickly as possible when there's a disaster. And unless you've properly planned for those contingencies, the likelihood of you succeeding in a way that you really thought it would go is very unlikely. So, and when you're creating a plan, there's going to be some things you need to think about. And this is one of the first things you want to think about, which is how quickly do you need to be back up and running? It's called your recovery time objective. So you've got a fire, you've got the flood, you've got the ransomware. How quickly do you have to be back up and running? Is it hours? Is it days? Is it weeks? But you want to know this for yourself, for your business. And this is really a business decision. Your IT provider should not be telling you what your RTO is. This is something you need to decide as business owners, as stakeholders. How many days, weeks, months can you be out? And then let your IT provider know that, because this dictates what your disaster recovery solution looks like. So you want to be thinking about what your RTO is. And we can guide you in that conversation, but ultimately you need to think about that conversation and what you're going to do there. The next item you want to be thinking about is what's called your recovery point objective. This is the point in time prior to the outage, prior to the disaster, that you can restore your data from. You know, obviously, if you have a disaster, we want to be able to go back to your last good backup, your last good image of your data, which could be yesterday. But what if it turns out that they were in your network for 2 weeks and they've damaged, you know, they've compromised your last 2 weeks of backups? Well, if your recovery point objective is only 2 weeks, that's what you've got in the backups. Now your backups might be compromised. So you want to be thinking, how far back do you need to be able to go? Could be, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. We had a customer situation where we needed to restore one of their servers from over 30 days ago. And if they'd only had 14 days worth of backups, they would have been out of luck. So you want to be looking at how far back do you need to be able to go? What is reasonable? What do you need for your business? And document that and let the people know so they can put together the right kind of solution that's going to meet that recovery point objective. One second here. Okay. This is a bigger issue, right? We think about disasters. We often think of the minor disasters, the ones that might have us be down for a few hours, maybe a couple of days. This is another one you'll be thinking about. What is the maximum tolerable downtime? This is distinct from the recovery time objective because this includes all impact considerations. I was showing that example before of Kaseya being down for multiple weeks and some businesses being down for multiple weeks, close to a month. You have to know what that is because that also determines what your disaster recovery solution looks like. You might say, look, I'm not really worried about the fire, the flood. You know, I've got insurance for that, or however you want to phrase that up. But you really want to know, like, given all of that, how long can you be down? Because there's a big difference between being down for a couple of hours or a couple of days versus being down for a couple of weeks. And you want to know what that is, because again, that will dictate the type of disaster recovery solution you have. If you want to plan for the worst case scenario, which is your whole business or your whole cloud that you use is down for an extended period of time, if that's the biggest, that's, you know, not an impossibility these days, showing you examples of where that's happening, then are you really prepared for that MTD? What does that really look like for you? And every business is different. Some businesses, they can be down for a month. May not be fun, may not be comfortable, but they can be down for a month. There's some businesses, they can't be down for a week. So you want to be thinking about that too. So what's your recovery time objective, your recovery point objective, and your maximum tolerable downtime? And here's what that looks like. It's all about time. So in that star, you've got that security event, right? You got that alert, something happens, right? The fire, the flood, the ransomware. And then the clock starts ticking. So out in your future is that recovery time objective and that maximum tolerable downtime. So how far out does that go for you? Where are you going to draw your lines in the sand on this stuff? And the same thing with your recovery point objective. How far back do you want to go? You might do yearly, some of our customers are storing data for 5 to 7 years. Want to be able to go back that far. That could be something else, right? The disaster could be a lawsuit against you and you need to go back and recover some HR data from 6 years ago. But you want to be thinking about this, what does your RPO look like? A lot of people I know are doing like I said, 7 days, 14 days, maybe 30 days. That just may be insufficient these days. You want to be thinking about a longer time frame, 60 to 90 days at least. And think about your timeline, because this is where it is. And this is, this is when the event happens, and this is where people start calling. When is it going to be back up and running? When is it going to be back up and running? How much data? And when it gets back up, where will we be back up? Are we going to be back up to last night? Are we going to be back up to 2 months ago? So I can start planning what I need to do. Okay. We talk about encryption in different ways, right? So encryption is that idea where it takes your information and it runs it through some mathematical algorithms such that when someone else tries to look at this data, they can't see it, they can't read it. You want your backups to be encrypted, because wherever you're going to have those backups, either on premise, on an external hard drive you're bringing home, in a data center in the cloud somewhere, you want those encrypted. And because sometimes what's happening is people are going in and messing with the backups as part of the attack. And you'll find in some of your insurance policies, they might be recommending that backups are encrypted. So you want to make sure you're using a solution that's going to encrypt your backups. Have that be part of your disaster recovery plan. As you're creating your plan, you want to know what your business continuity, your disaster recovery, like what's the scope? And you got to be really thinking everywhere, because you have systems and data in a lot more places than you used to. You want to assess these and prioritize these, and there might be different solutions for each one of these. So what about your on-premise systems, right? A lot of you still have servers in-house running your applications. So are those protected? Are those in scope of your disaster recovery plan? Or maybe they're not. We have some clients where they have a legacy system, some old accounting system or old project management system, and they don't want that as part of their disaster recovery solution because, they use it periodically, but if it gets lost there, it's not a big deal for them. For some it is. So again, you want to know what is that scope. Also, if you're using cloud-based servers, anything that's off-site, a hosted server somewhere, how is that being backed up? Does that still follow your policies? Workstations often get overlooked. We picked up a client earlier this year that had a big ransomware incident, and they had to reload all of their workstations. They had 60 computers. That's 60 computers to reload Windows. All of them had gotten ransomware. And once you're attacked, you really can't and shouldn't trust these systems anymore. So the best bet is to wipe them and start from scratch. So they had to reload workstations, 60 workstations, reload Windows, reload all the software, reload all the license keys, reconfigure all the printers, reconfigure all the extra software they use, the PDF readers, those applications they only use at tax time, things like that. They had to reload all that stuff, reconfigure everything. That takes a lot of time. And in some cases, you don't even have the media to do it. So there's ways of backing up those workstations. We recommend backing up at least some of your workstations, if not all of them. Because again, you want to be able to get back up and running quickly. What about what you've got stored in your email and calendar and contacts? Maybe you're using an on-premise server for that, or maybe you're using Microsoft 365 or Google Workspaces, G Suite. How is that data being backed up? Do you want to include that in your disaster recovery plan, or are you just going to trust that they're not going to have outages that are going to be so impactful on you? I don't recommend it because there's times where they've all had outages for anywhere from hours to longer. But again, is that critical? If it is, and you want to be thinking about that. Maybe email is your most priority, the highest priority thing. Okay, great. How are you prioritizing? How are you protecting that? We're also starting to store more data in the cloud in these services, right? You didn't just, when you bought 365 or G Suite, you didn't just buy email, you bought collaboration technologies like SharePoint and Teams, Drive, OneDrive, things like that. How are those being backed up? Now, why do I say you want to back them up? Let me give you an example. We have a client that uses SharePoint and they have hundreds of thousands of documents in SharePoint. It's a document system hosted by Microsoft, all hosted at Microsoft. Great. The client accidentally deleted those hundreds of thousands of files. That happens. People make mistakes. Microsoft could not easily restore all of that. They would have had to restore absolutely everything back to a baseline. They couldn't just restore just the missing files. Then we looked at, how to restore things from the recycle bin. They also used a third-party solution we provide that backs up the cloud, backs up their SharePoint information. Works great, does exactly what it's supposed to do, and it's super helpful when if you erased accidentally a few hundred files, a few thousand files. But to restore hundreds of thousands of files was going to take like 3 or 4 days. Now, if they had that didn't work for them, so we end up coming up with a different solution. But that 3 or 4 days, if that's how long it's going to take to restore something, then you need to build that into what? Your recovery time objective. Because if you set a recovery time objectives for 2 days and it takes 4 days to restore all the data, guess what? You're going to bust your recovery time objective. What about your website? You all have websites that are hosted somewhere. Sometimes you have a lot of information in those websites, blog posts, social media, a lot of time and energy spent customizing the website, creating the content. How are those being backed up? Who's responsible for backing those up? Cloud services, line of business applications. Maybe you're using a cloud-based contact management system. You're using a cloud-based customer relationship management system or a cloud-based whatever for your business. Shipping applications, banking applications. These companies are not immune. They make mistakes in terms of design, right? Like that OVH data center fire. If you were using a cloud-based service that was hosted in one of those OVH data centers that were on fire and got destroyed, and they didn't have a using another data center as well, or having good disaster recovery plans, guess what happens for you? You want to be asking them what they're doing. You want to inspect what you expect from them. And a lot of these have what they call shared responsibilities or the complete absolving of responsibility. So you want to know like where these things are. Banking. I was watching 60 Minutes a few months ago and they had the chairman of the Federal Reserve. His biggest concern about our financial crisis, a potential financial crisis, was not a new mortgage lending crisis or dot-com bubble bursting or anything like that. It was attacks against the banking systems themselves, cyber attacks. It will happen that these big banks are going to suffer major outages. And then what about other things like your phones or physical security, your camera system, things like that? Are those things that you need to have disaster recovery around? You need to have those as part of your plan. If your phone system's down, what are you going to do? Have it roll over to cell phones? I don't know. But you want to be walking through that. You want to be thinking about all of that and thinking about the impact of each one of your systems and you might even have separate recovery time objectives and recovery point objectives and maximum tolerable downtime objectives for each different system. You might say, hey, if phones are down, we can roll over to our cell phones easily. That can be down for a few weeks. But our accounting system, no, we need that. It's tax time. We can't be down for 2 weeks. So you gotta be thinking through all of these things. It takes something. It takes some work. So there's some best practices around this. You want to start crafting your business continuity plans. And we've got some templates we can have you start with. We can help walk you through some of these conversations, but ultimately this is a conversation about your business, and you're going to need the stakeholders involved, the business owners. They're going to need to be telling you what some of their expectations are around these things so you can make sure it's happening. Same thing around disaster recovery. So the disaster happens, how do you keep business running? Disaster happens, you're going to start get your business running, you're going to implement your business continuity plan, then you start implementing your disaster recovery plan. How do you get those computers and services back online? So you want to create a test plan as part of your disaster recovery test. You are going to restore data, you're going to restore a system, you're going to log in, and you're going to get into your recovery of your accounting system, and you're going to run your accounts receivable report and see, does it match your current accounts receivable report to the penny? Things like that. How do you actually test these things? It's not just a matter of restoring a file. You've got to know the systems themselves actually work. Some of the services and systems you use, they don't like to be recovered in a traditional way. And you need to do things like relicense them or install a new license key or something like that. You know, they know something's going on. How do you do that? Who do you call? That's where you start to develop your playbook. Who you call, how you recover the systems, how you test them out. What does that look like? It's a written document that you keep. Your IT provider keeps a copy, and then you have to do a full test. When I say I have to, you don't have to do anything. But I mean, if you really want to know that it works, you have to test it. What's the other way to know it really works? Anything beyond that is a guess, it's a speculation, it's an assumption. And you want to look at it yearly at least, pull it out. You know, the first time you do this, it takes some time. This is not a small, simple project, which is why a lot of you don't have it done. We've set up disaster recovery solutions for clients, and we sell them the technology and the initial setup and the initial test of the basics. But the disaster recovery test is really a separate item because that's almost a whole separate project. Now everybody takes us up on it because it's an extra cost item. And we understand that. But it really takes something to know that it's going to work. It can take a couple of days of work. It can take a few $1,000s, depending on what your plan looks like. But what's it going to cost you if it doesn't work? Having a playbook, having it fully tested, that gives you peace of mind. That allows you to sleep well at night, which is why we call our suite of security tools and technologies Sleep Well. We want you to be able to sleep well at night. Having a playbook and testing it out is what makes that possible. There's some technical elements of your disaster recovery solution. And we want you to be looking at some of these as you're planning things out, as well as thinking like, well, I know what you're saying, Jeremy, it's a process, but I also know there's things we got to buy and things we got to do. Here's a few examples of that. At a minimum, data backups. And you want 3-2-1, right? You want on-site data backups, you want off-site data backups, and you want those data backups air-gapped. And there's a couple of different ways to air-gap it. One is you can copy your data backs to an external hard drive, and then take that external hard drive and put it somewhere else. Take it home with you. Take it to a bank. Take it to one of your other offices. In some cases, air-gap means it's in a different data center and it's using a different technology to get there. You know, in some cases that works really well. In some cases that's going to be a problem for you. In some cases you might want you want both. But you want to look what that is because they are trying to attack the data backups. We used to use backup tapes, and tapes had their problems and issues, and we've since moved on for most of you to external hard drives or these offsite cloud solutions and all of that. They definitely make it easier than swapping tapes, and there's a lot of great benefits of those other solutions. But boy, those tapes were air gapped. You know, you had a stack of tapes and you had a problem. You never really had to worry about this getting compromised, except in the worry of a physical disaster. So you want to think about how you're going to do that. So there's the data backups. That's the most critical, absolutely the most critical, right? You can almost always try and reload the systems. It's going to take longer. It's going to take more time. But as long as you get your data back, you're usually in pretty good shape. But it adds to the length of time if you have to reload those systems. It can take days, weeks to reload all your servers and workstations. So that's why we recommend mirror images of all of those servers, not just the data backup, but a mirror image of your whole server, of all 5 of your servers, all 10 of your servers, whatever you have, having a full backup of not just the data, but how it's all configured, the operating system, the database behind it, the license keys, the configuration, all of that. Get those mirror images. And guess what? You want all of that on-site, off-site, and air-gapped. So that those mirror images are not compromised as part of a ransomware attack. That's why you want those air-gapped. Because the more likely, the more time you're going to be down, the more work you're going to have to do, the more likely you or your insurance company is going to want to pay that ransom. I don't want to get into the whole politics of ransoms and paying those or not. Needless to say, you know, I get people don't want to pay the ransom because you're just enabling the attackers. But once your business being down, you choose. City of Baltimore had a ransomware attack, I think last year. I believe the ransom was around $500,000. They opted not to pay, and they've spent over $20 million rebuilding their systems and reloading everything. It's a choice. Some of you are doing local on-site backups, and your off-site is, you know, you're sending things off to an off-site storage solution. There's a lot of different ones out there. So your backups are both on-premise and your backups are off-site. That's great. If you have that physical disaster or your off-site or your on-site backups are compromised, you're going to have to get that data back from the off-site storage. Depending on how much data you have backed up, that can take anywhere from a few hours to a few days or longer to bring that all the way back down over the internet. So some of those offsite storage solutions have the ability to put all your stuff on a hard drive and send you a hard drive, which is great, but that still takes some time. Oftentimes they promise you'll have that data back up within like 3 to 7 business days. So again, if your recovery point objective is 2 days and it takes 3 days to get a drive shipped back, or 5 days or 7 days to get a drive shipped back, it's going to bust your recovery point time objective. So better than just having your backup stored off-site in an off-site storage solution is having your data and systems off-site in another data center. Data center, big building, lots of servers, internet, power. And not only is your data there, but your systems are there, and you can actually bring up all your systems in the cloud in one of these data centers and do virtual recovery. That's the Cadillac solution. That's fantastic, right? You've got, that kind of protects you from almost all types of disasters. It's possible those data center virtual instances can get compromised, and that's not an impossibility. But when it's done well, it's very unlikely. And usually the hackers are going to move on to easier prey unless you're a real high value target of some kind. So for some of our clients where we've done disaster recovery tests recently, and they had the right kind of Cadillac solution in place, we're able to bring up their servers in the cloud, have them log in, test those out, and see that they work. And we can do that without interrupting all their other day-to-day work. Also, for some, local virtual recovery is important. How do we get things back up and running? How do we get those servers running in our offices if we have a ransomware attack? How can we make that happen quickly? How do we do that? That's local virtual recovery. And then it's a technical element, it's documentation. It's creating that playbook, how to recover, configuration information, license keys, a lot of that. There's a lot of components to this. But this all comes, remember, security is not a product, it's a process. So what I'm talking about here are more products. Without the process behind them, again, may not meet what you're looking to have done. So one of the outcomes of disaster recovery planning is what we recommend is what's called a disaster recovery playbook, a DR playbook. And there's some key elements of what's in the DR playbook. First of all, who's on your disaster recovery team? Who gets called when there's a disaster? You know, it's probably going to be maybe you, it might be the business owners, some other stakeholders, might be your insurance company. Hopefully your IT provider's listed there. Might be some critical vendors or customers you might need to call. I don't know. Depends what your business is, but who's on the DR team? Who do you need to be able to call when something's going on? And defining the scope and goals. You know, it might be to get these 5 critical systems up and running, but you're not going to worry about your phone system as part of your disaster recovery playbook because you've got a different solution for that. And then documenting inside the playbook that essential system configuration. This gets kind of geeky, but like IP addresses and passcodes and license keys and other things you might need if you had to restore your systems, either from scratch or by bringing them up in the cloud. And then how do you do it? There is a process. There are procedures. It takes something to get your systems back up and running. It's not just a flip of a switch. There's usually some work involved. It's going to take a few hours or a few days or whatever that looks like, but you want to document what that process looks like because hopefully we never need to use this for a disaster. And the only time we're ever going to really revisit it is when we refresh and test your disaster recovery process periodically. But when we need it, we need to know exactly how things are done. We want to know how we're testing it, have that documented as part of your disaster recovery playbook. And then again, as things change, you want to make sure you're updating and changing that disaster recovery playbook. So it's just a few elements, you know, this, depending on what your needs are, this could be a, you know, we have templates for this. It could be a 5 or 10 page document, but you want to have this in place. We really recommend it again. Otherwise, it's just gonna be best effort. People are just gonna do their best to try and help you recover as best they can. Without these things in place, it's going to look very different than if you had all these things in place. You know, just think about that thought experiment. Go through your head. If you had to recover everything, is it going to be easier to do it if you've got a written plan and instructions, or is it going to be easier to do it on the fly, pulling it out of your butt, trying to figure out how this is going to go along the way? Don't assume your IT company has all this worked out for you already. Like I said, this takes something. It's not always included when someone brings up a new backup solution for you. Again, they might do some real basic tests. They probably didn't do all of this. Because again, it adds to the cost. It adds to the complexity. But it's the thing that's going to save you when the time comes. Worst case, you know, inside of all of this, before, during, and after your business continuity or disaster recovery, you want to be checking it on your cyber and business interruption insurance. There's a lot of reasons for that. One is, in the end, if you can't recover, it may be the only thing that keeps your business alive, maybe the only thing that makes you whole. I was talking about a customer earlier that got hit with ransomware, and they brought us in afterwards to help them recover. We were going to start the recovery process, and their insurance company would not let them start rebuilding their systems yet because they hadn't done all their analysis of what the extent of the damages were going to be. They didn't, this insurance company did not allow them to start really building the systems onto that same impacted equipment for about 10 days. So you want to know what's happening there. You want to know what their policies are. what do they say you have to have in place for your disaster recovery plan? What do they say you need to have in place for your preventative technologies and processes? We're starting to see, I'm getting requests from clients to review requests from their insurance providers where they're now reassessing their security threats and asking them very specifically about backup, disaster recovery, when it was tested. Do you have multi-factor authentication? Do you have these other technologies in place? Because guess what? If you don't have these in place, they might either increase your premiums, they may drop you, or they may not pay out if you're not following these covenants that you've already agreed to in your cyber policy. So we recommend you review this. We recommend you make sure you have sufficient insurance, that you're following what they say in terms of how to be proactive around dealing with breaches, as well as how to deal with one happens. So I want you guys to get, this is not a question of if, but when and how bad. Whether it's a small disaster of a few files, whether it's the big ransomware, whether it's the big power outage, whether it's the data center fire, whether it's the supply chain attack like SolarWinds or Kaseya, you have been impacted, you will be impacted. Again, not a question of if, but when and how bad. And a lot of how bad is going to be up to you. It's going to be what your takeaways were from today and how in action you get around these things. Now, you obviously have to rely on other people often to make these things happen, and we get that. But again, this is where you want to inspect what you expect. And we recommend this be your #1 priority in the world of IT. You want to know what you've got there because it is bad out there. It is getting worse, not better. The threats are increasing. The scope of your potential for impact is huge because you no longer just have that server in your office anymore. You've got your servers, you've got cloud services, you have different cloud services. Talk to those providers, ask them what they're doing. If you're using some cloud-based line of business application that's specific for your industry, great, totally makes sense. What are they doing about disaster recovery? What are they telling you they're doing? And again, don't just look for technologies. Don't just look for assertions. Oh yeah, we've got this protected. We got your back. You want to try and dive in more about what they've got and how they're doing it, and understand where their limitations are, what you've agreed to as limitations. So again, we recommend this be your #1 priority. If you've got questions around that, let us help you out. If you want some, and it could just be a conversation. If you just want to run a few things by us, let us know. Give us a call. Here's my number. Here's my email address. Here's our social media and mailing list. We recommend, joining up there, and you'll get more information around upcoming security threats, things we think should be on your radar, upcoming webinars, of course. And, if you think this conversation, you want to hear it again inside your business, maybe the people that needed to hear it couldn't be here today. Maybe you're also on a board of a nonprofit, or you're on your committee at church or some other business or something you do, and you think this would be a valuable conversation, or any conversation on security or anything else we talk about. I'm always available to speak on those and love that opportunity to do that. We can't guarantee or push people to do things. All we can do is uncover blind spots and help them see what we see, and encourage them to get into action, create some way they can start making a difference in their ability to deal with security issues, recover from security issues, keep their systems running effectively, reliably. That's what we're here to do. We guarantee a better technology experience, and part of that is through our webinars and what we do. So thank you very much. You guys can, if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself. I'll be around for a bit. Otherwise, enjoy what's left of your summer. Be safe, be well. I hope all is well with everybody. And thank you for everything. Thanks for attending, and we'll see you around. You're very welcome, James. Thank you.